Okay, for the second part of our lesson today, we're going to talk about what it means to find the absolute value of a number. And before we describe what absolute value is, I want to show you symbolically what it looks like. So take a look at our screen here, and I'm going to write down the symbolism for the absolute value of 4. So here's the number 4. The absolute value of 4 is just when I put two little lines on either side of it. I'm going to leave that there for a moment, and I'm going to talk about something else. What does it mean to symbolically show the absolute value of -4? Well, I would just write the number -4, and then I'd put these two straight lines. It's almost like parentheses, except that they're straight lines. That would be the absolute value of -4. So this is the absolute value of 4, and this is the absolute value of -4. Now, the question is, what does absolute value mean? So we've got the symbolism written down, but what does absolute value mean? So let's talk about that. Absolute value, another word that we can use for absolute value is the word magnitude. So magnitude, it's a very science-y kind of physics-related word that means how big is something. So an earthquake, we talk about the magnitude of earthquakes. The higher the magnitude, the more damage the earthquake has done. Absolute value refers to the magnitude of a number's size. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes, especially in science-related fields, we'll talk about moving in directions in terms of positive and negative. So here's what I mean. Let's say I was walking in a path that ran north-south. So it's a path that I could walk on, and if I walk one direction, I'm walking north, and if I walk the other direction, I'm walking south. In a physics problem, I might decide to say anytime, like at the start of the, or maybe I start in the middle of the path, anytime I walk north, I'm going to call that positive. So if I walk 4 miles north, I would say I walked positive 4 miles. If I walked 4 miles south, then I would say I walked -4 miles, which is a little bit strange because usually we talk about distance needing to be a positive quantity. But when we're talking about distance and direction kind of happening together, we sometimes use positive and negative to talk about which direction we're walking in. So in this case, in our example, we're saying positive is north, negative is south. However, to the average person, or maybe even to a scientist who just wants to know how far I walked, they say, I don't really care about positive and negative. I just want you to tell me the magnitude of your walk. That means I want to know how much walking you did. Don't tell me it was positive, or don't tell me it was negative. Just tell me how far did you walk. And the answer would be 4 miles. Because whenever I talk about magnitude, about how great something is, I use positive answers. So let's look at our symbols here and talk about what does it mean to find the absolute value of 4. How big is 4? If it was 4 miles walking north, the absolute value would be just +4. Does that change the answer here with the absolute value of -4? I'm asking how big, how great is this number? It doesn't matter if I walk north or if I walk south, if it's positive or if it's negative. How big is this number? And the answer is just 4. Thinking about it in terms of miles, walked north or walked south, when we talk magnitude, and I'm going to put that number or that word here in the middle, magnitude, I'm just talking about its size or its greatness. Here's another way that we can think about this. I'm going to show you a number line. Typical standard number line with 0 in the middle. And let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's the number 4 right here. And then we're going to go in the negative direction. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's another way that we define absolute value. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0. So a number's, so using the pound sign as symbol for number, a number's distance from 0. So I have 4 and I have -4. When I ask for the absolute value of 4, I'm asking for how far is 4 from 0? Well, this isn't rocket science right now, but I'm going to draw it out just to make a point. 1, 2, 3, 4 units away from 0. So the absolute value of 4 is 4 because it's 4 units away from 0. Now, what does that mean when I say, what is the absolute value of -4? Well, how many units is -4 from 0? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I write it just as a positive 4. So here's an easy way of saying what I just showed you what the answer is based on the definition of absolute value. But here is the really simple way of thinking about absolute value. When I have absolute value, when I take the absolute value of a number, the answer is always positive. It's never negative. So if it's positive, the absolute value is positive, whatever that number was. If it was 3, it's still 3. If it was 10, it's still 10. If it's 115, the absolute value of 115 is still 115. So a positive number, when we take the absolute value, just stays the same. If I have a negative number, I just drop the negative sign. So if it's -3, the absolute value of -3 is just regular 3. If it's -6, the absolute value of -6, the absolute value would just be regular +6. If I have 1 million, the absolute value of -1 million, the answer is just regular 1 million. The answer to an absolute value problem is always, always positive. In fact, it's impossible to get a negative answer for an absolute value. Okay, we're going to take a break for a second. This is kind of part 1 of defining absolute value. I'm going to give you a part 2 where we're going to see how this affects how we solve an equation. So all the rules for solving an equation will remain the same, but we have to look at it a little differently because, as it turns out, equations that involve absolute value will give us 2 solutions.